Okay, so Stephen and I are back for the second part of our baseball discussion. We've got four more films to go. I meant to show you, I am wearing my Expos jersey, not a jersey, a t-shirt tonight, which is meant to look all faded and everything.
It's been around.
Yeah, it hasn't been around, but it's meant to fool you into thinking it's been around. The other thing I was going to say about Bull Durham, I'll just make this quick. It had kind of a double ending. It you know, Tim Robbins goes off to the majors, and then he shows up at Susan Sarandon's house. They spend the night together, and then he's gone in the morning because he's gone off to some other place. And that seemed like the end of the film, but then he comes back a second time. It's just kind of an odd thing. It worked. It was just odd. Okay, so Bull Durham, I looked him up. Oh, and I also looked up Leon Daddy Wags, and
Daddy Wags.
I was absolutely right. He hit 37 home runs and knocked in 107. Just some numbers stick out in my mind. I must have, when I used to memorize baseball statistics, I must have been intrigued by the fact that he wasn't all that well known, and yet here's this guy that hit 37 home runs. I had the team wrong. It wasn't for Cleveland. It was for, do you remember what team he went to after the Giants?
Angels? Was it the Angels?
Yeah, it was for the Angels, yeah. Bull Durham was 88. So the next thing we'll talk about, we're going to talk about three from a very narrow window. The next thing is Field of Dreams, 1989, and Kevin Costner again, and James Earl Jones again. So let me start off, Stephen, by saying, you're going to hate me. I did not hate the film. I didn't. I was ready to because, I didn't see it at the time. I saw The Natural. I just hated that. Never went back to that. Assumed I was just going to despise this. I didn't hate it. The thing I'll say is that I think it's best not to approach it as a baseball film. To me, it was better as a film about fathers and sons and the whole aspect of.
I think that's true.
Yeah. There really wasn't a lot of baseball in it, to be quite honest. And I know why as you said, as you previewed the whole Church of Baseball nonsense, which in general is why I avoid baseball films. Basketball films I love, they don't have that. They don't try to deify the game. The best ones anyway. I guess maybe there are films out there that do, but Hoop Dreams doesn't really, and neither does Heart of the Game. Baseball films are guilty of that all the time. And Field of Dreams is guilty of that. But thankfully, there was this other film that I responded to more. But go ahead, tie into it.
Okay. When I wrote about it, I compared it to Forrest Gump. And it's partly in agreement with what you just said, in that in the end, it's not really about baseball. And if I might complain about the baseball part, but that's almost a different topic. There's the father-son thing. And the way it was established that Costner and the wife, I forget.
Oh, I know.
Ed Harris's wife.
Yeah.
Anyway, they were 60s, children of the 60s. And when the father comes back, the father didn't understand him. He was like a hippie in the 60s. He was a rebel. He went off to Cal or whatever that was. Then they come back together and they reunite. And the message seems to be, you see, Dad was right. The 60s weren't right. Let's go back to the pre-60s of the nostalgia. And then, of course, the baseball nostalgia comes in. And that's what I think, that's Forrest Gump, which is, to me, is so reactionary. And that's what I see happening in Bull Durham, Field of Dreams. The baseball part, it is partly. I'm going to check what I said here. It's that the movies is intent on that thing where baseball for a metaphor, baseball as this beautiful thing, uh, nostalgia for the past, blah blah blah. Well, one of the ways you know that is that you say there's not a lot of baseball in the movie because it doesn't really care about baseball. You can't tell. In Bull Durham, you can tell that guy knows his baseball. In Field of Dreams, anybody could have made it as far as it went. And when you got Joe Jackson batting wrong-handed, that's that's it right there. Then finally, I will say that there's a great irony, I think, especially in the context when we talk about Bingo Long. James Earl Jones gives the most famous speech in the movie. The big long thing about you come, they'll come, blah, blah, blah. He's the black guy in the movie. Every one of those Field of Dream guys is white, which makes sense in the context of they were the Black Sox. But it's pretty ironic that James Earl Jones is speaking as for baseball as an important part of our history and everything, when at the time that those players were playing, black people weren't even allowed to play in the major leagues.
Yep, that's a
And,
good point.
I will say, I got one nice thing to say though.
Yeah,
Burt Lancaster. I never don't love Burt Lancaster.
I'm glad you mentioned him. I almost forgot about him. Yeah, it's the Burt Lancaster of local hero of Atlantic
Mm-hmm.
City. He had a real late career renaissance, and he
Mm-hmm.
is one scene. He's great. Yeah. Um, I was going to say you would especially object to the whole thing about let's erase the '60s from memory because you come out of Berkeley and come out of that moment. So I can see where you would find that particularly objectionable. One other thing I liked, and just a minor thing, was you can see, I think it's James Earl Jones sitting there thumbing through one edition of the Baseball Encyclopedia. I've got three editions. That's the one that came out, I think, in after the strike season of '81. It's the middle of the three editions.
I was
um,
looking at baseball reference recently and I was thinking, when you like, let's get nostalgia when you say, you youngsters don't know what it was like. We used to have a book so big you could use it for a doorstop. It was enormous. It weighed 1 billion pounds. It had 2,500 pages. And then a decade later came out this one called Total Baseball that was bigger in all the directions and had more pages, and the print was all this big. And you just look through that stuff. You had to be careful. The paper was so thin. But you go through those books, and then one day Sean Foreman cranks up that website and don't need those books anymore.
yeah, the Pete Palmer Total Baseball. I was thinking about that. They will never publish another baseball encyclopedia because they're just so redundant now, right? I can't even the amount of time I spend consulting um, baseball reference. That's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
I used to have to haul the old one out, but I never thought about it. I used to pour over it. I love the black ink. I love looking at career boxes with the black ink, and I'm glad Baseball Reference kept that going. Um,
I got it. I'm sorry. I got to say this.
yeah.
Uh, After I quit working in a factory, I didn't have much money. I would win free tickets to Giant games. They would have a trivia contest on the phone. You'd call on the phone and you had to answer 3 questions right. And if you got them right, you get 2 tickets to a game. And the first question was always, what number do Willie Mays wear? So it was always easy. And the second was, and the third question was always, what was Willie McCovey's batting average in 1963 or something like that?
Okay.
Well, I would sit there with my encyclopedia and they had that third question. And when I heard Willie McCovey, boom, and I just turned to Willie McCovey's page while they're going on with the rest of their damn sentence. And then it says 1963, and I type in 279 or whatever it was. You win 2 tickets. This is all thanks to that encyclopedia.
And they didn't even know you were using it.
No.
Let me criticize Field of Dreams for a bit here because until I kind of connected with that aspect of the film later on, it is the most absurd film. Like you're supposed to just buy the premise of the film, which is completely ridiculous. He's hearing these voices. And his wife hears the voices too. So it's okay. I'm going off in search of this guy. And his wife is, yes, you have to go do it. It's just preposterous. Like, I can't believe anybody at the time was willing to look past that, even if even if you want to believe in the film's messages and the romanticism of it, the people would look past that. It makes no sense whatsoever. And his brother walking, or brother-in-law walking right through the players because he can't see them, but then he can see them. Um, that was crazy.
I don't remember. I read the book at the time before the movie. I don't remember that it bugged me in the same way.
Yeah, it's a
You know,
revered Canadian writer, right? W.P. Kinsella. I haven't read it, but yeah, it has a reputation. I have a feeling that many liberties were taken with the film. Um, and around the same time, we're not talking about it, but the film Eight Men Out came out, and I remember thinking that was pretty good at the time. Obviously, Field of Dreams really has nothing whatsoever to say about the Black Sox scandal or Joe Jackson. I mean, it kind of hints that Joe Jackson was, it adopts the really cliched thing that I think Bill James has very carefully debunked, the idea that, oh, Joe Jackson couldn't have been involved because he hit 360 or 380 in the World
mm-hmm.
Series. And this film seems to, I don't know if it's W.P. Kinsella or just this film seems to believe that. And I think that's pretty easily disproven. Um, so it doesn't really have anything to say about the Black Sox scandal. Again, the only thing I responded to, I guess, because I used to play catch with my dad. It was a big thing. And I did respond to that. And there was something about Costner. I guess his gee whizness somehow didn't draw. I didn't hate that either in this particular film.
It was appropriate to the part as it was written.
Appropriate to the part. James Earl Jones did his best. Burt Lancaster was good. And who was the actress that played his wife? She's well known at that time. Like I
Yes,
want to say
Amy Madigan.
Amy Madigan. That's right. That's who it was. So
My
anyway,
foster son used to be good friends with with their daughter.
okay,
I
she has
thought,
another.
if they get married, Ed Harris will be my uncle-in-law or something
There
like
you
that.
go.
Don't know what that
Uh,
meant, but
she has another well-known film too, at least one other one. Anyway, that's all I want to say. I guess I got about as much as I could hope for, which is that I didn't just absolutely despise it and got through it and can say that I've seen it now. The film I do want to say that I was surprisingly disappointed in was A League of Their Own, which I assumed I was going to enjoy it. It's got people I like, Gina Davis, Tom Hanks, I generally like. It's got Madonna. Directed by Penny Marshall. I figured it would be light and it would be, and there's no reason I ever really avoided it. I just never got around to seeing it. First of all, I thought Tom Hanks was terrible. Totally miscast. You can't have this like fresh faced Tom Hanks playing this, what's supposed to be this grizzled old guy. And I think they kind of made, I think they probably had Bull Durham on their mind, creating this character in a way, partly because he's sort of like the Kevin Costner character. He's a career minor leaguer. Um, and then they just, at least the first half of the film, he's just always snapping at people and being really difficult. And that character just, I think, ruined any chance that I was going to like the film. Gina Davis, I guess she was fine. It has this framing device where, the two sisters and starts with the reunion or whatever, trying to get the Gina Davis character. Um, Historically, I guess it was of some interest. Ken Burns certainly talked about women's baseball, and that was after League of Their Own. So I guess I got to credit it with that and bringing that back into public consciousness. Burns spent some time on it in baseball. I don't know. I just didn't like it. I really didn't. Go ahead,
like
defend
you, I there were people in it I like. Lori Petty. Just
Lori
feel like
Petty.
her career. I don't say her career's been wasted. She's always done something, but
Footloose.
she's
She's
unique.
footloose. right? Yeah,
She was the pitcher who and the sister of Gina Davis.
right.
And she left after that. She went on to become Tank Girl, which
Tank
is
Girl.
probably the most typical part she ever played for her. She's just quirky, and I like her. And I found that in most of the cases, as we talked about the realism of the players, they looked, the way were filmed in such a way. Apparently, Madonna was supposed to play an infielder, and they were working hard to get her to learn how to do grounders, and she ended up playing in the outfield because that was just wasn't going to happen. But you know what? It's not just because they're women. Actors in general, and that's their Kevin Costner, Kurt Russell. They're not natural baseball players necessarily. They got to get trained. And I thought the women in the movie were fine as far as portraying ball players. Uh, I think for me the problem was I don't want to go too far because I like the movie, but it really is about an historic moment for baseball and beyond. And but Penny Marshall, I suspect it's her. It's a very straightforward movie. It's not as bad or boring, but it's certainly not revolutionary. The
No,
the spirit of the baseball league that we get to watch in the movie, the the way the film is presented is very mainstream, straightforward, and I think it could have used a little more Lori Petty, I guess. The thing that I know I'm missing something though there is because uh, I think when I look on Wikipedia, maybe that or maybe IMDb anyway, apparently this is the most popular baseball movie ever made.
did really well. I remember
So
that.
so if I'm sitting there saying, well, they should have done this or that, well, guess what? They knew something. They were
Mhm.
doing something right. Um, Baseball movies, it turns out, don't usually they're not usually big box office. So that's part of it. It didn't have that big of a box office, but they don't usually. And then maybe because it had the angle of the women players, that brought some people to the theater that wouldn't necessarily go see a baseball movie. But I'm just guessing. I was
Yeah,
interested that it was so popular.
I'm sure Madonna had something to do with the box office
That could
success
be.
of
That
that.
could be.
I was interested in the fact that it ended with "This Used to Be My Playground," which was a song I really liked at the time. And I'm thinking that I maybe I'm wrong, but Madonna probably possibly leveraged permission to use that song with getting the part or something in there, or use getting the part as permission to or leverage to get the song into the movie.
Mhm.
It seems like there was some horse trading was going on there.
Yeah.
Um, it worked. It just showed up at the end for no particular reason. Um, I felt I should have been moved by the film. Like even Bingo Long, I found the end moving. There wasn't anything that really moved me in the film. Uh, I don't know. Did it have? I can't remember how it ended. That was the first one I watched, so that's now weeks ago. I told you what my memory's like. Did it have sort of an ending that was similar to Bingo Long, where somebody said, "Okay, this is probably going to be the end of these leagues now that the war's ended," or
Um,
something like that?
that could be. I don't remember that. I remember, it takes place. It goes back to the pre-flashback eating. They're back at the reunion,
Oh yeah, that's right.
and
Yeah.
if I remember right, and I too has been a while, but I think that we see the real people
Yes,
that were played in the movie,
that's right.
and so they did do that. And, yeah, that's nice.
It was the Rockford Peaches were the main team, right? The
Yeah,
most
I
famous,
believe that was
yeah,
their name.
because my university roommate lived in Rockford. I went down to Rockford once, and we spotted members from the Shoes, my favorite power pop band, sitting in a restaurant.
The
Uh,
shoes.
the Shoes, yep. Okay, so now we can get into two that um, I've seen more than enough times that I think I'll be a little more detail oriented. The next film chronologically would be Moneyball, which I can now unequivocally say, when we eliminate documentaries, is my favorite baseball film. I've seen it twice in total when it came out, and then what got me going on it again was it's a film that plays constantly on TV, and I would stop on certain parts, at least one part, which I think is just fantastic. And for this, I had the cause to see it start to finish again, and I just think it's an excellent film. There's so many things I like about it. I've read the book. I don't know that it does the book justice, or at least it can't be the book. You know, it can't get into the weeds like the book. It's the what's the film Beautiful Mind with John Nash.
Yes.
Because there can only be so much math in Moneyball, um, but it compensates in other ways. Things I love about the film, I think Brad Pitt is excellent. I think Philip Seymour Hoffman is excellent. There are at least three times, at least three lines I'll quote. I've been quoting them with other people many times that I want to quote because they make me just laugh out loud. Um, the first time I saw it, I remember I used to argue with this guy on the message board all the time, arguing about I thought the scouts were really well portrayed, the old school scouts. I thought they got that idea across well. He thought they weren't good at all. I don't know what he was talking about. I thought the scouts were excellent. Um, I even like what's his name? There's another guy in the message board I like a lot, a guy from Toronto who thinks that Jonah Hill's terrible in the film. I think Jonah Hill's really good myself. Yeah. So give me your overall impression, then I'll get into the three lines that I love so much.
Well, I liked it, maybe not as much as you, but I liked it. So preface it with that because now I'm going to lay out a bunch of problems.
Okay.
First off, if you were what's his name? The Brad Pitt character. I can't believe I'm blanking. Billy Bean.
Billy Bean.
No, it's not bad to be Billy Bean and have Brad Pitt play you in a movie. Brad Pitt is most charismatic and gorgeous.
I
Yeah,
know.
that's me on the screen right there. That's Brad Pitt.
I just, in
Um,
anticipation, I wonder if you're going to say the one huge problem I think is there in the film. Go ahead.
well, again, I'm going to say some of the things I find are problematic, but
Yeah.
I like the movie, so I
Okay.
just want to get that out.
There's one
I
huge
think
thing.
Philip Seymour Hoffman, he's never not great,
Yeah,
but
I
I
agree.
think the way the character is written, Art Howe is not a fan of that movie. He says that look what they did to me, and my son gets mad because he's not like he doesn't love Art Howe, but he said Art Howe was a ball player. He was like Philip Seymour Hoffman don't look like he ever played a game. He's a slob, and so he objected to that part. I just objected to the fact that Art Howe was presented as this troglodyte, and I would then go to you mentioned about the scouts. It's not that the acting was bad, but I felt like in order to make the point that the new paradigm had happened. And I think it does a great job of doing that, seeing how things have changed in baseball. It did that partly by making the scouts all look like not that they were stupid, but that they couldn't get with the new regime. And so the way it was presented from my vision was you got to get rid of that old stuff because this is what's happening. Instead of we're going to take the good of that and we're going to add the good of this and we're going to have an even better one. So there's that. Finally, well, okay, side note, as somebody who spent, mentioned baseball perspectives, I spent a lot of years complaining about Giants general manager Brian Sabian, who, of course, went on to lead them to 3 World Series. But
Right.
when Billy Bean calls Brian Sabian on the phone and calls him Saby Sabes and rips him off for something, oh man, I used to think all the time, I wish we had Billy Bean. So I love that part. Anyway, the other thing I'll say, wasn't bothered by this, but I know people who are sticklers for accuracy. Uh, the A's had a great pitching staff.
That was the
You
thing I
know,
was going to raise.
okay, they don't have anything about them in there. Uh, some of those guys that they said, look, we got this guy. He's a big fat slob, but he walks. Let's get him. Most of those guys didn't pan out, so it made it seem like they're discovering all this great talent, and that was a bit of a problem. On the other hand, uh, the win streak was terrific, and I love the way they, worked in the actual broadcast. Those of us out here, we recognize all the voices and stuff, and uh, I mean, just in general, I'm just sitting there and complain about a bunch of stuff. I like that movie, I really do.
Yeah, I think the film is very, and I don't know, I can't remember how the book handles it. The book is very disingenuous about not barely mentioning Barry Zito, uh, Mark Mulder, and who would be the Hudson, Tim Hudson. I think,
Yeah,
yeah, I think one of them you might see the jersey of one of them. It mentions Tejada a bit more, you know,
yeah, but not much more.
really just in footage. It doesn't talk
Yeah.
about it. And he was like one of the candidates for MVP that year. I think he was so
Mhm.
good. You know, probably juiced up, but still, he had a good year. Um, yeah, you think that Scotty Hattenberg was the driving force of the team and the sidearm relief pitcher, and they had good years. I looked them up, but like to not mention their pitching staff is it might be a bridge too far, as they say.
Well,
Uh,
because there was a story to be told about
yeah,
what
I
was going
know,
to work. It's just the
I
same
know.
way that the scouts had to lose the argument and the pitchers had to disappear.
Yeah,
Uh, then that leaves us for to look it up after the movie, I guess.
I guess so. I didn't find the scouts. I thought that seemed realistic to me that they're going to say, look, you know, that's what they're going to say. You know, you have to know the game. We know the game. There's 100 years of
Mhm.
experience sitting around this table, and you got your formulas. I know now. Eventually, baseball reached a happy medium, but I imagine some of that, opposition was there early on. I don't know.
You are correct. At the
Yeah,
time, I wasn't young, but my baseball knowledge had gotten to that point where, yeah, I did think those scouts were morons. I did think there was a way to do it, and these guys got to get out of the way because here comes the revolution. And I
yeah,
think now I look at it and I think I was probably a little harsh, just like the movie maybe was a little harsh, because as you say, those scouts did know something. They weren't just doofuses. They
yeah.
had experience and stuff.
Hoffman, I would compare Hoffman's Art Howe to his Lester Bangs. I have a feeling his Lester Bangs is, I've seen footage of Lester Bangs, probably not all that accurate. I think Marcus says the same thing. It's not the Lester I knew, but I liked him anyway. Um, and I just think that his creation of this character named Mark, I'm being hypocritical here, contradictory, because I'm taking the film to task for not presenting Barry Zito and Mulder and Hudson
Mhm.
accurately. And I'm saying, oh, it's okay. They create a totally different Art Howe. I guess I just like Philip Seymour Hoffman too much.
Uh,
Um, the three lines
Coincidentally, by the way, I just watched Almost Famous a couple days ago, so
I
I got
saw,
that
I saw
Lester
your
Bangs in
post.
my
I saw
head.
your post. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was good. The three lines I absolutely love. I got to quote them again. First one is where he's making his pitch. He and like, is it Ron Washington is the coach? I think
yeah.
yeah. They make their pitch to Scotty Hattenberg, and he's trying to say, you're going to play first base. And he goes, I don't think I can play first base. And Billy Beane says, yes, you can. It's the easiest thing in the world. He goes, Wash, tell him. It's the easiest thing in the world. He goes, what's it like? It's incredibly difficult. So the way he says it is great. There's this really weird non sequitur where I think it's the relief pitcher. Bean visits the clubhouse, and the relief pitcher, just before he goes, the relief pitcher says, Mr. Bean, I want to thank you. No one's ever given me a chance. And I want you to know that my family and I are praying for you. Billy Bean walks away and he says, no problem. Like, who would answer that way? It's just great. Go ahead. I'm not offended. You're praying for me. No problem. And then the great scene, which I find moving and funny, that last scene where he's had the visit with is it Theo Epstein who interviews him or Dombrowski? I don't know, the Boston guy.
Thinking that, but yeah, I don't think Theo was there yet.
Okay. Anyway, somebody from Boston, probably somebody well known, interviews him. He comes back and he sits down with Jonah Hill. Jonah Hill says, I want to show you some video. They go in, they watch the scene of the minor league catcher who's afraid to run to second. And I love the whole idea. He says, and Billy B says, oh, they're laughing at him. He says, yeah, do you know why they're laughing at him? because he hit a home run and he doesn't realize it. I find that very moving. But then it comes in with this great line. Billy Bean says something about, how can you not get romantic about baseball? Jonah Hill says, it's a metaphor. Billy Bean says, I know it's a metaphor. I love that stuff. That's the stuff I would watch over and over again. And before I actually watched the film in its entirety the second time. I think it's a really good film. I really do.
We
You
should
know,
mention in passing then, because Michael Lewis is in the news right now
what
because
for?
he's the one who wrote the book, The Blind Side, is it called? Where
Yeah, with
the
football
people
player.
are suing the family now. It was
Oh,
a story
really?
about the family that adopted the guy. There's a whole big I can't say that I'm really reading up on it, but I see it partly
Uh-huh.
because Michael Lewis lives here in Berkeley. So our local people are all on it. Look, oh, here he is. They're talking about Michael Lewis, and he's pretty upset about it all. Anyway, it's a mess. That's probably the most
Okay.
accurate thing to say right now. So
I'll
he's
have
in
to
the
look
news as we speak.
I'll have to look that up. Last thing I want to say, because we've got about 9 minutes left, we're going to save that for Reggie, is that when I watched it this time, the father-daughter stuff, which possibly seemed intrusive the first time, I didn't think it was that bad. There wasn't all that much about it. It wasn't all that much. I thought it was actually okay when she sang her song for her father. Um, Reggie's the name of the film, documentary that's on Prime right now, and boy, I love 70s baseball so much, and Reggie's just everything I love about the 70s. I got taken to task on the message board for being this old guy who wants to forever live in, Reggie's 3 home runs in the 77 World Series and think that baseball's been downhill ever since. I love that. That was one of the thrills of my baseball watching life, at watching that. And I think I mentioned it in an online biography. I literally leapt off the floor from a sitting position when he hit his third one. Saw him, I think, in fact, I know in 1969, saw him. We were in Disneyland, and my dad took me to an A's game, and that was his first great year. Hit 47 home runs, I think, and he was on pace until the All-Star game to break Maris's record. He had 37 before the break. Um, Rooted against the A's the first of their 3 World Series wins because they were against the Reds, but then I was totally for them the next two. Won a small bet when they beat the Mets in '74. Um, and, just remained a fan of his. He just seemed to be in the middle of everything for a long time.
Yeah.
And the film gave me, I got to say, it's just different watching Reggie, this film's the Reggie that this film gives you. First of all, he's older now, and he's not the Reggie with the swagger from the '70s. He's an
Yeah.
old, soft-spoken guy, and that was just really weird to see. His voice, it didn't sound like Reggie to me. Um, and the other thing is, and I'm not saying this is not true. It clearly is true. I just did not think of him in the '70s as someone who was so um, mindful of race and his position in the game as a black player. You got the feeling that he was almost like a Michael Jackson of baseball in the '70s, where color didn't exist
Hmm.
for Reggie. He was loved by all fans. That's not true. I shouldn't say that. Obviously, a lot of people hate him as a hot dog and all that. But he seemed to be a player that transcended race. And of course, I'm being naive, and I was a kid because I didn't think about it. Of course, he didn't. I mean, he encountered the same issues that Hank Aaron and everybody encountered, and that comes out in this film. But he didn't really dwell on it at the time. He didn't seem to. Although I guess maybe being younger, I was oblivious to it. That was really interesting to me. If anything, the documentary is about race first and foremost, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I
So
should throw in one of those anecdotes that who knows if it's real. I think it was Mickey Rivers who said
Mick the Quick.
Reginald Martinez Jackson. You got a white first name, a Latin middle name, and a black man's last name. No wonder you don't know who you are.
Yeah, I love Mickey Rivers. So what do you want to say on the film?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention and didn't come up in the movie for some reason. For a while, Reggie had a car dealership here in Berkeley.
Mm, seems
And I
quite
went in
knowledgeable.
there once because he had on like he had a couple of bats and a couple of memorabilia things, and he had big old cars. Maybe that was the problem. They were big old cars, and this was Berkeley. But that place didn't last that long. And as I recall, when he shut it down, he said in a kind of a grumpy tone, "People in Berkeley don't buy cars." I don't know. I like Reggie, but I was kind of proud of us for doing that as far as it went. Uh, I think you're right that race is important throughout and that it deals with it well. Um, I think it's pretty honest about Reggie as a athlete and as a public figure. I think I wrote at the time. I think he would like this movie. It's kind towards him. It's not that it doesn't show any warts, but it's almost like he gets to tell you about his warts, which isn't quite as bad as Billy Martin saying you're an asshole or whatever.
Yeah,
So, in that way, it's not hagiography or whatever that word is,
yeah.
but it is definitely favorable towards Reggie, and it makes you like Reggie. I like the way that it placed him in the context when he talked to a couple of people from other sports. Dr. J was it, and
Oh,
and they were, and there's like, we can talk because we're the top of our game,
yeah.
and so we're going to get together and talk about it. I thought I like that part.
I liked
Now,
I liked seeing all the conversations. Raleigh Fingers, Joe Rudy, Hank Aaron, Dr. J. I loved Dave Stewart and Vida Blue together.
yeah, and Vida had just died, I think, but not
Yeah,
too long before I saw the movie,
yeah,
and yeah, we all knew. It's like I hadn't even thought about it. Dave Stewart's a legend in this area. When they had the earthquake and there was that 2 week break or whatever, Dave Stewart was out there in the broken down highways trying to pull people out. So he's Dave Stewart. But then I like the way it was presented there, which is, once he was a little kid and
yeah.
Reggie was his hero and Reggie, took care of him. I like that. I like that
And,
stuff.
and I like the
I
way
think it was
that
over.
I like the way that Dave Stewart and Vida Blue kind of on a timeline bracket Reggie, right? Because Vida's early 70s. I know he has a long career, but the height of his fame is 71. And Dave
Yeah.
Stewart, the height of his fame is 89. That's an 18-year gap, and Reggie kind of sits in the middle, links the two of those guys.
Yeah. I just thought of
Um,
this just now, which is, although Reggie's probably known best as a Yankee, but between this one and Moneyball, that's out of seven movies, two of them have the A's at the center.
front and center
And
on that.
nowadays, who would now? What's the A's? It's the team that's going to move. It's really that they're so out of it. Unfortunately for their fans, who are great fans, but
I think there's got to be a
somehow
movie.
we.
I think there's got to be a movie in the 2023 A's story, right? I mean, it's sad, but
Well, you mentioned you hadn't seen Major League, but that's the plot of Major League. Is this rich person buys the Cleveland Indians and makes them stink because she wants to sell them or something. I forget the exact part of it, but she tries to make them stink so she can make money.
well, it's
And
basically
that's how the A's seem like that right now. The guy's just going, I'm going to make money off of this. And
it's
first thing I'm going to
basically
do is not pay anybody.
springtime for Hitler, basically.
Yeah, that's right.
Um, I don't know. There's other stuff I want to say, but I don't know. Should we stop now, or just should I try to squeeze in something in the last minute and 40 seconds? Should we
No,
restart up?
you can go for it.
Okay, there's other stuff I want to say. The one thing I'll say is the whole Billy Martin, that great, amazing thing that happened in front of national TV where he gets pulled from
Hmm.
the game. When you watch that play, it is clear, like, what is Martin's problem? Like that, Reggie has no play. He did, it was a bloop. He wasn't even close to it. That was completely ridiculous. That was like an old school manager, making it and really making a show that I'm going to show this, black guy making tons of money. I'm going
Yep.
to show him who's boss. It was
Yep.
ridiculous. Absolutely. Okay, well, listen, there's more I want to say about Reggie, but we're down to our last minute, so I think we got the bulk
Like
of
it
it
was
in.
okay, and I better sneak this in then. I
Okay,
think I always do. Billy Martin and my mom went to high school together in Berkeley.
that's amazing. That's amazing. I
That's
mean,
my personal connection to Billy Martin and my he pulled
That's
my
great.
mom's hair or something, you know.
I have, some nostalgia for Billy Martin. He sounds like he was an awful guy, and obviously was haunted by drink and all that. He comes off terrible in this film, but something about him, I guess, just being of the time period. I recommend Reggie. I'm glad we got to talk about these films, and try to think of we'll do basketball films next time. Just kidding. I love basketball films. Okay, take care, Stephen.
Thanks for the idea on this.
Yeah, good to talk to
Had
you.
fun.
Take care. Bye bye.